So, where do I even begin? Digimon Story Time Stranger is Bandai Namco Entertainment's third installment in the Digimon Story series following Hacker's Memory that came out way back in 2017. This also marks the return of the franchise after 2022's Digimon Survive, its older and more mature brother that isn't afraid to go into a more horror and supernatural narrative. But going back to the game itself, Time Stranger, despite it being a part of Digimon Story, doesn't particularly follow the narrative of its predecessors. However, it does build up on that same foundation and it turns up to the next level. We're talking about next level graphical fidelity, a much broader scope in terms of storytelling and world building, improved gameplay mechanics with added functionality, and did I mention more Digimons? After playing through Digimon Survive, I honestly wasn't expecting anything that will blow my mind here. Its story follows one of two main protagonists, and if you played Pokemon before, this is the part where an old professor in a white lab coat will ask you if you were a boy or a girl. But all jokes aside, our silent main protagonist end up getting tangled in a three-way war between two factions of Digimon and the humans, which led to a world-ending disaster right from the get-go. And yeah, I'd be speechless too if I were in that situation. Now this is where the Time Stranger in the title comes in, because right after the huge explosion, you'd expect you'll be in a better place by now, but instead, you wake up in an unknown place, meet a weird cosplayer in a serpentine garb, and eventually travel 8 years into the past. And this unexpected event allows you to investigate the anomalies that could prevent the disaster from ever happening. Now, while the story after that remains simple and straightforward, what really caught me off guard was how much more alive the world is, unlike how other monster taming games tends to be. Because what really separates Time Stranger from the rest is how well integrated each and every Digimon is. At first, you just see them as roaming monsters in the sewers of Shinjuku, but in the next, you get sucked in a wormhole and a new world opens up right before your eyes. A bustling town filled with Digimon of all shapes and sizes, just living their lives like any normal human would. But what really reeled me in is what it does after that. It just doesn't give you eye candy with its beautiful landscape and sceneries. It doubles down with its character and world building by having a narrative that has more layers than my leftover lasagna. But I'll spare you the details because it's a story that's best told firsthand. Much like the previous Digimon story titles, it shares the same kind of gameplay loop and mechanics. You start by choosing a starter digital monster to fight alongside you, and unlike a certain game where you trap monsters in a red and white ball, these Digimon that roam around are then scanned for their data whenever you battle them, and eventually they can be converted and added to your roster. Battles are done by using your 3 active Digimon in turn-based fashion, and using elements that imitates a rock paper scissors format where each Digimon type beats the other. Meanwhile, elemental stats and resistances further complicate the engagement by limiting or amplifying your team's overall damage. What's really nice here is it rewards the player to diversify their roster from the over 450 available at launch, or adjust the team's equipment to add certain types of skill desks that could change the tide of battle, unlike before where a Digimon only learns certain moves by accessing multiple Digivolutions that can learn the specific skill. This streamlined process reduces the amount of time you'll spend training monsters to pursue the meteor cuts of the game's core. Because what's new here is an ability tree for the character itself, which provides multiple effects for your Digimon or unlocks certain limitations like higher level Digivolutions. And speaking of Digivolution, this is basically the equivalent of accessing higher level forms through rigorous training and battles. Each Digimon has access to multiple forms like an Agumon that would normally Digivolve into a Greymon, but when certain conditions are met, you can deviate and choose a Geogreymon or even a Numemon who is already a different species of Digimon. However, certain forms are also locked behind much higher stats, and this is where the Digifarm can come in handy. You can train a Digimon to increase some specific stats like attack, defense, or intelligence, among a few others, especially when leveling up wouldn't be enough to achieve some required stats. New additions to the game also include a simple digicard battle and something called Outer Dungeons, which adds another layer of gameplay. Sometimes you're tasked with a race, other times your goal is to prevent a horde of Digimon from reaching the goal. And while it's not as properly implemented, Time Stranger now also adds the ability to Digiride, which makes exploration somewhat cooler. Although my childhood fantasy of getting carried by a Gewamon is still not fulfilled, but hopefully in the next game, please. Compared to its predecessors, Time Stranger is a much better game in all aspects, and that's very clear starting from its visuals. Now that its potential isn't limited to run with older hardware like the PlayStation Vita, the world and its Digimon pop in great detail. The vibrant and colorful tones of the various areas in the Digiworld really shines, especially with diverse landscapes and themes that each of them brings to the table. From the town governed by Merukemon, which has so much character in terms of its overall feel, and the people, or rather, the Digimon that inhabit the busy streets, to the village near the ocean, which is easily my favorite place for having one of the more heartwarming scenes in the entire game. The only real downside here is that while its visuals is one of the best the franchise has ever produced, the silent protagonist pulls you out of that immersion whenever it gets a chance to talk. As I mentioned earlier, exploration in a Digiride is not as properly implemented. What I mean by this is it just fails to capture anything noteworthy. Since the game still follows segmented areas rather than a more open world environment, riding a Digimon you like adds nothing more than just visual flair, which is a bit of a shame. It's still nice to have, but I just wish there are more open areas instead of the complicated dungeon-like hallways and corridors to justify its addition. Quest tracking can also be quite cumbersome since it fails to recognize fast travel options like Birdramon and Pegasusmon as the quicker route. Digimon Story Time Stranger is easily the best Digimon game to date, spanning over 40 hours of content in the first playthrough. While it doesn't actually have any hard-hitting competition within its franchise, the difference is just night and day. Not only does it provide a highly engaging and fully fleshed out story, it also doesn't shy away from expanding its narrative to provide some nice little moments like Divermon and Shellmon's story, or how Volcanusmon is such a huge nerd for action figures. Its gameplay elements are also quite engaging, but this is coming from someone who, as a 10-year-old, played the heck out of Digimon World 2, so take that as you will.
And for everything else gaming, choose Envision.
A community built by gamers.